Good evening. Today is Tuesday, November 24th. We're here at the Civic Center. Excuse me, I'm in the wrong. Y'all tricked me. It's December the 11th. But y'all know it then. It's December the 11th. We're here at the Civic Center for a special meeting for the fire assessment discussion. As everyone knows, we've had one meeting last month. It was our only time. I think since then we've all had time to try to digest what we heard and what's going on, but we will move forward with that. And Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you guys for being here. We brought Ms. Walker back with the Government Services Group, and she's going to go over our updated presentation. We worked really hard to work on these numbers and bring them down some, and there's some different rates than we talked about before. Also, I am on duty, so if I have to go out for a call, I do apologize, but I'm covering a shift also. So, ready, Sandy?
Good evening, Sandy Walker with Government Services Group. This is kind of like a continuation of the November 14th presentation that we gave. And so some of the front slides will kind of go through. Unless you want me to slow down a little bit, I can. So essentially a fire assessment is a charge that's imposed against property to pay for fire services. It can be anything up to the level of first responder. It cannot be EMS. Since your department is volunteer and they are first responder level, all of your department's calls and all of your budget can be funded through a fire assessment. To be a valid special assessment, a non-ad valorem assessment, you have to meet case law requirements. The first case law requirement is that it has to benefit property. And again, the courts have said fire services do benefit property, not EMS, but we don't have to worry about that again because of your department is a first responder level only. And the second component and the key component is that it has to be fairly and reasonably apportioned. It has to make sense how you apportion the cost. It can't be arbitrary. The methodology that we have developed for the city, and we have looked at a couple of different methodologies, but the one that we feel works the best for the city is the historical demand methodology. This is what we call the tried and true methodology. It has been upheld by the courts for years now. About 95 to 98% of the assessment programs in the state of Florida do use a historical demand methodology to impose fire assessments. It was more recently looked at again in 2010 by the Fourth Court of Appeals, and it was upheld again. So, and we were also the expert witnesses on the Desiderio case, which is the case in which the courts looked at it. And so, again, it's the most widely used, court tested and approved. The historical demand is the driving factor. So what we do is we look at where your services are being demanded. What categories are demanding your fire services. So we look at the makeup of where you're spending the most of the time on fire services. And then it's based on the initial response, so it treats all calls the same. There are four key components to the methodology that we look at. We again look at your service delivery, your first responder volunteer. What we're going to present to you is going to take you from strictly volunteer to paid and volunteer, and that would be to help your ISO rating and to keep your insurance available here in the city. We look at your fire flow to see what amount of fire based on the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association standards, what your resources for your city would be able to put out a fully engulfed fire. And your square foot cap for non-residential is 8,150 square feet. Now that's not to say that if a building catches on fire that's larger than that, you wouldn't have additional resources coming in from your mutual aid and surrounding areas. But in order for us to develop your fire assessment, we have to look at just your specific resources. So that's why you have a square foot cap. And then the benefit area, all the parcels in the city provide services to them, so they all benefit. The second component is your fire budget, and we looked at and developed a 5-year average assessable budget. We looked at your call data and determined where your calls, who's demanding your services, and then we looked at your property data. And we looked at all the tax parcels in the city. We looked at the building uses, the type of units on the parcels, whether it be non-residential square feet or dwelling units. And based on input that we got last time in November, we also did look at vacant land parcels. And just so you understand, the parcels in your city, you have 74.39% of your parcels are residential, 2.8% are non-residential, and 22.8% are vacant land parcels, just so you understand what the makeup of your city is.
Give us that again, please. Yeah, one more time. Say that again.
Okay. Based on the Bay County Property Appraiser's records, 74.39% of your parcels in your city are residential parcel. Single family, multifamily, mobile home, all residential. 2.8% of your parcels are non-residential, and 22.8% of your parcels are vacant land.
What is non-residential?
Not commercial, industrial, warehouse.
Thank you.
Okay. So then we developed your 5-year assessable budget, and we started off with what your status quo is. Then we enhanced it by adding 6 more firefighting positions so that you would have 3 paid firefighters on each shift. We added an engine because you need a new engine, and we financed it over a 10-year period, and we've got the debt service in here. We also looked at doing some needed station repairs. So after we include all of the enhanced services in the budget, we got your net expenditures. We subtracted out, we netted out your revenues. You get $15,000 revenue from Bay County contract. So we netted that out to get, and then we added the miscellaneous assessment expenditures for implementing the assessment program. So out of a 5-year average, and we adjusted this a little bit from last time, we kind of tightened the belt a little bit in looking at that. So it brought it down to $838,504 for your 5-year average budget. So the rate scenarios that I'm going to give you are going to be based on that 5-year average.
Not the 917 now, but 830.
838,504. And it's right there on the bottom of that chart.
The 917's the first year, Mayor, because you had $70,000 for station repairs and some extra money for firefighter bunker gear and some other equipment that we would need to outfit the new guys with.
And that's why we do a 5-year assessable, so you can smooth out the rates instead of going up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
Then the cost apportionment. Again, like we said, you asked us to look at the land. I was mistaken. I had said there was around 6 calls that went to land. I went back and looked, and there were actually 9 calls that went to land. So you had 16.28% that was going to non-residential, 3.49% that was going to vacant land, and 80.23% that is going to residential. Now this is where it's key for the fair and reasonable apportionment, because this shows where your demand is going. 83.23% of your calls are running to residential type properties. 16.28% are running to the non-residential type parcels, and 3.49% are running to the vacant land parcel. So whatever budget you want to fund, whether you're going to fund the $838,000, the $917,000, or something lower, it has to be divided up into these pieces of the pie. So just to keep it fair and reasonable. And then the parcel apportionment, what is fair billing units to charge. Residential would be charged based on a dwelling unit basis. Non-residential would be charged on a square foot basis because they vary in sizes. And vacant land would be charged on a per parcel basis, not a per acre basis, but a per parcel basis, again, because of your resources that you would definitely have to, if a big acreage of land catches on fire, you would definitely have to call in additional resources. So it's a per parcel charge on the vacant land. So then we go and the 5-year assessable rates, again, based on this, including the land, 80.23% of the calls go to residential. Therefore, they pay $672,753 divided by the total residential billing units of 1,892 to get a $356 per dwelling unit residential rate. Now, this is about $40 less than in what it was when we didn't have land, so that's a good sign. The non-residential, again, you do the same math, and it's now 50 cents a square foot instead of 56 cents a square foot. And then the vacant land parcels, and again, it's a per parcel charge, it would be $54 per parcel for every vacant land parcel. And that would fund about $838,504. We've given you the impact. It would be a policy decision as to who you would want to exempt, whether you'd want to try and collect it from government, mostly it would be you, and institutional tax exempt the churches and not-for-profits. If you decided to exempt them, you would net $812,987. Again, with the maximum building square footage of 8,150 square feet, the most at these 50 cents a square foot rate, the most the non-residential building would pay would be $4,081.70. Your average commercial building in the city is 2,865 square feet, and that would pay $1,434.86. And then your average industrial warehouse building is 3,717 square feet, and that would pay $1,861.56.
That per building?
So then,
Hold on, he had a question.
Sure.
The industrial building was 3,000 square feet?
that's the average size, but if it's less than that, but that was just
But I'm
taking
saying
all of them.
that's per building, so
Per building.
if someone has multi-buildings on a lot,
Yes.
they still.
It would be per building.
Hmm.
Then I gave you a few different scenarios that you could see how the rates fluctuate. Scenario one is status quo. That means you're only funding what you currently are funding now with the general fund. You would fund it with an assessment program, but it wouldn't accomplish the task that you're trying to accomplish to increase your ISO rating. You wouldn't get anything additional. You wouldn't get any of your enhanced services with this, but the residential rate would be $105. The non-residential rate would be 15 cents a square foot, and the vacant land would be $16 a square foot. And that would net you about $240,000. Again, the maximum non-residential building would pay $1,202.75, with the average commercial building paying $422.81, and the average industrial warehouse $548.54. The next scenario, what that scenario says is we're gonna implement the enhanced services that the fire chief is recommending so that you can keep your ISO rating and keep the insurance available in your city. But you're gonna have a hybrid of funding your fire department. This would say you're gonna continue to fund the general fund that you're already funding right now. About $200,000 from the general fund is gonna continue to fund the fire department. And then the enhanced services would be funded from a fire assessment. So that would net you about $642,000. And the residential rate would be $281. The non-residential rate would be 40 cents a square foot. The vacant land rate would be $43 a parcel. The maximum non-residential building would be $3,224.54. The average commercial building would be $1,133.54, and the average industrial warehouse would be $1,470.63. And then again, your maximum, which we just went over on the prior slide, that would fund the status quo and all of your enhanced services. It would completely fund your fire department's budget from that. Then the implementation schedule. Tomorrow you are scheduled to adopt your resolution of intent. A resolution of intent, and I'm not going to be here tomorrow, so I'm going to explain it to you. It's a procedural document that is essentially keeping your options open to using the tax bill collection method next year. It's not binding. If you decide, it doesn't say you have to go forward with a fire assessment, it just keeps your options of using the tax bill open. So you can adopt it. There are a lot of advertisement procedures. What it's under is it's under statute 197.3632, which is the tax bill collection method. And it says that if you want to use the tax collector's tax bill, you want the tax collector to collect your non-ad valorem assessment for you, you have to adopt prior to January 1 of the year that you're going to put it on the tax bill, you have to adopt a resolution of intent. You also have to advertise it once a week in a newspaper of general circulation for the 4 weeks immediately preceding the public hearing. Tomorrow's your public hearing. You have already done the advertisement requirements, which advertising is usually quite pricey. I don't know what your newspaper charges. So you've already done the 4 weeks of newspaper publication. So by adopting this resolution of intent tomorrow, it just keeps your options open if you do move forward with an assessment program and you want to collect it on the tax bill next year. So I would recommend, even if you're on the fence about whether you want to implement an assessment program or not, to at least keep those options open and adopt that resolution of intent tomorrow. From that point on, you've already got an ordinance in place, because last year you adopted an ordinance. It was kind of a master service and capital assessment ordinance. And I think the intent of adopting that ordinance, from what my discussions with your attorney was, I guess you were trying to do some cleanup in case you guys had to go in there and people weren't taking care of their property. You needed to go in there and fix it, and you wanted to be able to collect that back from them. I'm not sure, I wasn't here, that's just my understanding. But under that ordinance, you can impose service assessments and capital assessments. The fire assessment would be a service assessment. So what that tells me is, it tells me that you don't have to re-adopt another ordinance. So the time frame for you to implement a program would be less, because you wouldn't have to have 2 readings of an ordinance. That's the only thing that it is. You still have to adopt what's called an initial assessment resolution. What that would do, it would lay out the program that you're going to be collecting assessments for, a fire assessment. It would lay out your rates, any exemptions, how you're going to charge it, the type of methodology that you're going to use. You would adopt that. Then you would advertise a public hearing, and you would send first-class notices to all property owners. So this way, it's not a surprise to the property owners. They would all get their own individual letter that says, this is what the city is intending to do. This is how it is going to specifically impact you. And we're going to be having a public hearing on this, and we'd like to hear your input before we make our final decision. This is when we will be making our final decision, and you're invited to come and express your opinion. Last time when I was here, there was some concern about not enough public education and things. So what I've done is I've added a new line item in there. If for some reason you wanted to mail out Statutorily, the notices need to be mailed out 20 days prior to the public hearing. However, since it's a new program and you're interested in having maybe an informational workshop, kind of a little informal workshop to hear what the public has to say before you make your final decision, you want to have a little bit of time to think it over. What I've added is a new line item that says you can send the notices out 30 days early and let people know, hey, although we're going to have the public hearing and make our final decision on this date, we're going to also have a public workshop to where we can hear what you have to say too, early. And you're invited to come to that too, because you probably, until you let everybody know exactly how they're going to get impacted, this is our experience, you're going to have the same crowd. And until they specifically see how it is going to impact them, you're not going to get as much input from the property owners. So that's why I have that informational workshop line item. And these are just two different optional schedules. It would be up to you what schedule you'd want, and if you had some other ideas, I could tell you what the schedule would look like. The first year since you've missed the tax bill deadline for 2017-18, fiscal year 2017-18, it's anticipated that you would send out separate bills and collect it. The first schedule has it collecting it when the tax bills are due by March 31st. The second one has it another month. It delays it a little bit, but it would still allow you to continue to get some of that money in, so that you would have the money to start hiring these people, because it's my understanding that the ISO is giving you a September deadline to have new staff in place before they are going to actually change your ISO rating. So you would need that revenue, is my understanding, you would need that revenue to start hiring the new firefighters. So that's what this is. We could do another schedule if you wanted. And then anybody who didn't pay, we could roll the delinquents onto next year's tax bill. So then it would start going on the tax bill, and it would be a better collection rate, and it would be smoother every year from that point on. You would impose it. It's an annual decision. You can either increase the rates, decrease the rates, choose not to impose it next year. That is an annual decision that your council would make annually. So that would be what would happen. Policy direction, I believe this staff would need to know whether you want to even consider moving forward with this or not, what rates you would look at, any exemption policies, whether you want to exempt government parcels. Government parcels there's a collection issue, except for your own, you'd pay your own bills, but there's a collection issue because you can't put government parcels on the tax bill. So you would have to send them a separate bill and hope that they pay. Otherwise, you'd be involved in litigation, and you may get a judgment against them, but still, you'd have no enforcement mechanisms to make them pay. So that's a little different. Institutional tax exempt, sometimes it's a policy decision. Some of the churches and not-for-profits do provide services and benefits to some of the property owners that maybe are less fortunate than others. So they do a lot of community good that you may have to, as a city, provide if they weren't providing it. So sometimes it is a policy decision that our clients make to exempt them. Another thing which is not on this that we had discussed is, I believe on your water bill you have a hardship exemption for those people who truly can't afford it. That would be another thing that you could look at. You would probably want to piggyback some of the same requirements that you have already in place. But if since it would go on the tax bill, and if they don't pay it as well as their taxes, then a tax deed would be issued, and potentially it would go through the tax deed sale, and if the tax deeds weren't paid by the property owner, could potentially, they could lose their house. So what you're saying is if for some reason they just can't pay this, you don't want them to lose their house. And so that is a policy decision, plus any other issues that, that you feel you want to talk about. That's pretty much my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions or...
I've got a question.
Sure.
Practical. Vacant land, you've got 3.49%.
For vacant land? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what's that, what map, what?
Of
I'm-
all
I'm
the calls.
surprised.
It's not the size of the vacant land, it's the amount of parcels, because just like any other fire protection, there's a cap. So if there's one large parcel,
No, he's asking the percentage. That's
just
how
like-
many calls you ran. You ran 9 calls, so out of all the calls, it's 3.49% of the calls.
That's right, I apologize. So on vacant land, then, what, you've got 16, I'm not,
What it
explain
does is,
vacant land to me, let me just put it that way. Explain to me how you're coming up with whatever that, you're showing,
well, you ran 9 calls to vacant land, so out of all the calls, it's 3.49% of the total calls. Like, again, what I said, that's the demand. Where, what parcels are demanding the services of the fire department? So out of all the calls that they ran last year, in 2016, only 9 of them went to vacant land. So out of the 258 calls, 9 went to vacant land, 42 went to non-residential, commercial, industrial warehouse type parcels, and 207 went to residential parcels. So the percentage of demand is, a non-residential is using 16.28% of your fire services. Vacant land is using 3.49%, and residential is demanding the most at 80.23%, which is about right.
so do you take into account total vacant land?
We take into account all the calls that they ran to the vacant
My
land.
question is, do you take into account total vacant land? Just like you took into account the number of residential houses?
if you look on
Yes.
page 9, it says billing units, there's 546 vacant land parcels.
Yes.
And that's where that number's divided.
Yes.
All right, page 9. Yep. I have page 8, then I have page 10, there's page 9, page 9.
Page 10. Okay.
Well, page 9 has all the
Page
math
9
on
or
there.
page 10, okay.
Page 9
Are
has the
you
map.
calling those, that 546 is what, vacant lots?
Yes.
Vacant parcels.
Parcels.
Parcels in your city that don't have any buildings on them, or don't have any
And how
primary
does
structures.
how's the 500 acres accounted for at Bonfire Beach?
It's, okay, it depends on how many parcels it has.
It has none, it's not parceled out.
Well, there is at least one parcel. It's got a parcel
It's
ID. It
one
depends on
parcel.
how many parcel IDs there are. I don't know how many parcels IDs there are.
What about the Corey property? That's 88 acres.
Well, it
It's in
would,
the city,
okay, it would
and it's not
depend on,
parceled out. It
Well-
has a parcel, but it's not platted.
but yeah, and it would be based on a per parcel.
So that's one.
Mhm.
Bonfire Beach is one.
I'm not sure, but yes. It's
So
it's
80
only one
acres?
parcel, it's one, I don't know how many that one is, but I know Corey's is one.
80 acres would be the same as a quarter acre lot.
Yeah, remember, we can only put out so much fire, and also, like I discussed, there seems to be some misunderstanding on how we handle wildland. I'm federally certified as a forestry firefighter. We don't put out forest fires with water. We protect homes. So if that 88 acres catches on fire and there's no home in jeopardy, Division of Forestry comes in with D6 dozers and cuts lines. We don't put that out. So I know there was some confusion about, oh, well, there's the same fire department response. We do respond, but we respond to provide structure protection. So I can tell you this, in the call history, that 550 acres, in the last 4 years of reporting, we've never had a call there either. So we can't justify billing more just because it's big landmass when we don't go there, because we have to do it based on where we're running these calls at, and that's the case law requirement. So I've done a lot of research with Sandy on this, and so, yeah, if he has one parcel that's 550 acres, he only pays once, but he's not taxing the city or services that much, even though it is a lot of land, we're not running there. Do you understand how that works? So there's like some case law requirements.
And it's a cap, it's just like the non-residential buildings, there's only so much your resources can do by themselves without calling in mutual aid. So therefore, in order to be a valid special assessment, we have to look at what your resources can handle.
I'm sure it's probably would be, but if someone goes in and plats a subdivision in that area, 60 homes, then we would indeed then turn around and charge for 60 partials.
60
the
vacant
next
land
year.
parcels until a building is on it, then it would be a dwelling unit.
Right.
Yes.
Didn't think it would be fixed, but I wanted to check.
Yeah, no. And that's the thing, you update the roll every year, it doesn't stay stagnant, that this is, so if you didn't have a parcel at that time, you skated under and you never pay. Every year, the roll gets updated, and we look for any new, buildings, or removed buildings, and then that would go to vacant land. Changed, uses, someone used to have a residential house, and now they've, are operating a commercial business out of it, then it moves into the non-residential category.
When does that change occur? Once a building has been completed and hit the tax rolls or such, or at time permits are pulled on?
Well, what we do is,
Think
just,
of half-built buildings that catch on fire.
right, well, here's the thing. You can also do what's called an interim assessment, because, so you understand, taxes are paid in arrears. So your November tax bill, if you didn't CO, if you're building a building and you didn't CO by January 1, it doesn't go on until the following year. So sometimes the property appraiser doesn't capture those buildings. Assessments are billed in advance. So on the November 2017 tax bill, while your taxes are for the calendar year 2017, non-ad valorem assessments generally are for fiscal year 17-18. So they're being paid in advance. So what we try to do is we try to capture those buildings that maybe didn't CO by January 1, but are there and being used. And you have the option of implementing interim assessments. So it would be like a partial year. So if somebody got CO'd in February, they would have to pay the rest of that fiscal year's assessment before they got their CO. You would have to have some kind of process in place that when they collect for paying for the permit fees and things like that, that they also have to pay their assessment, and then the following year we would capture it on the roll going forward.
It looks like Bonfire's 6 parcels. It's just cut.
Does anybody know how many churches or nonprofit locations we have?
1, 2, 3, probably 4.
I mean, churches,
Churches or nonprofit,
Five.
around 5.
The Catholic Church doesn't count in the council.
Catholic Church.
Oh, okay.
Is
How about,
Catholic Church is not in the city.
No, sir.
That's part of the Bay County contract. That 15,000 is to cover that, and then one other parcel.
is there a criteria for hardship exemption? I mean, who-
Right now you have a criteria. I don't know exactly what it is for your water. Usually it's a 2-tiered. They must own their house, so it has to be homesteaded, and they have to be at a certain income level.
How many do we have in general using that now, do you know?
I really do not know.
It wouldn't be passed on to if you have a tenant that would qualify
I
for the
understand
poverty
that.
level. So usually there's not that many.
I was curious.
I don't know what your city is though, but I'm just saying in the programs that we work in.
We looked once before, it was like less than 20, I think, when we looked at it.
I was
Adrian and I
just
did.
kinda curious.
That's a guess, but I'm pretty sure it was less than 20.
Guess it's fine.
Because they don't own the homes. Many of them that don't.
Oh, we didn't even look at that. We just saw how many were
Oh, you
I don't
getting
know
the
if
water
your
bill. So,
I don't know if your water has the same requirements if you have to own the house or not.
so it's probably even less than that.
Less than that, then.
Because also too, just so you understand, your utilities go to the user, and non-ad valorem, just like taxes, would go to the property owner.
I have a question on the implementation of the schedule. If we wanted to do an informational workshop,
Yeah, the second option,
that's the only option we could do?
well, no, you could do any of them. I mean,
So
I could be here all day.
Okay, we could do it on the first,
Sure, I mean,
Okay,
you know, here's
okay.
the thing, you sometimes wanna, you could send out the notices and say, next week,
okay.
but it might be too soon for people to know. But it's just, I mean, I saw it advertised, and you know, it's usually the same people until they actually
Right.
see how it's gonna impact them.
Okay.
But definitely, you could do it the week before or something like that.
Okay.
And then this schedule also has for the public, you guys meet twice a month, and I assumed that you would want it on the Tuesday evening meeting as opposed to the morning meeting, when more people are available, and that's kind of what this schedule runs on, it's the evening meeting. And that was just based on some impact that I got last time.
All right? Yes. You don't have a question?
I've got, one of the questions, and Daniel, this may be for you. Somebody wrote and said, is this special assessment for the fire department really necessary or a true priority at this point in time?
I think so. I mean, we're facing an ISO deadline. The last time I can report is July 12th, and then September 11th, 2018, we will go to a 10. And what happens there, we've all talked about it. We can't get someone to say for sure. We've been told anything from insurance policies double to drop-in policies, but until it actually happens, we're not going to know. But it does need to be dealt with in a timely manner, and this was done at like a half-price rate, relying on volunteers still. So I can't say it's a permanent fix forever, but to fix it with full-time career personnel, we take these numbers and double them, because most of this is salaries. So this is still fixed at a half-price rate, which is adjusted for the city of Mexico Beach. But in 5 years, if we have no volunteers left, then we're going to have to revisit this. And that's just a real issue we have right now. We have 2 volunteers that live in the city, and only 1 is certified.
Question.
Yes, sir.
In looking at this, you may have mentioned, I may have went over. By chance, did any of the information indicate how or if it would affect, if we did nothing, would affect the valuation of our homes, since we would not have? Question was, I see a hand up, was if we did nothing, I didn't know if anything had come forward in what you were looking at, if there would be any effect basically to our home value as we may look to sell it at some point in the future without, is there any information on that?
I think what we looked at initially was the fact that whether you can get a mortgage or not. And if you can't get insurance, like I said, my own experience with the ISO 10 property that my family owned, we could not get insurance. We paid cash for the property, and we could only get a bond on the land value. So we could not insure it, and when we sold it, it was difficult to sell because it wasn't financeable. Because it was, now this is in another state, but still an ISO of a 10. So that's my only direct experience with that. And so would it decrease value? Probably not on the property assessor's world, but realistically, probably.
Okay, now you have a question.
No.
All right, go ahead.
She's going to call back, Sandy.
I've had 2 people contact me and tell me that they talked to their individual insurance owners, agents, and if the ISO goes to a 10, both of these people said that their insurance would only go up about $200, which was a very small portion of their overall homeowners insurance. And they said, in their opinion, and this is just two people, they said in their opinion, they'd rather just pay the $200 extra. And so I'm wondering how you're getting your figures. You say that you talked to the Van Lyric guy down in Port St. Joe to get your estimates on how much insurance might cost, and you're throwing out numbers like doubling, and these people are saying no. So how accurate do you think your estimates are?
Like I said in other meetings, I've been told that also, and I said I would like to see it, and their response was nothing. Once they told me that, I said, cool, can you give me a copy of that? I'd like to see it, because if that's the case, then I would like to tell everyone, okay, I guess we don't have to worry about it. We still have to have a fire department, but we'll go to a 10. And that's up to the community and the council, but every time someone's told me that, they didn't bring it to me where I could see it. So if that's true, send them my way. You know where my office is at. I'd love to see those numbers, and we'll bring them in here publicly so people can see. Because if that's information, because the last two people that told me that hung up the phone. So when my response was, can you get me a copy of that, it was just click. So I've heard that also, but I haven't had proof either. As I said, I cannot bring you proof of what rates will do. It's speculation. That's all it is. And I've been pretty clear with that. That's all I can do. I don't own a home here, so I can't call my insurance company.
Insurance companies don't like to be locked into anything either. My experience.
Jerry, go ahead.
I'm concerned with that captain. How much is the salary of a fireman if you've got most, and I can't see that, I can't see that, you hard. But if you say most of the either the 800, she talked to, 838,000 to 917,000, and you just say that over half that comes from salary, I'm in the wrong bit.
State retirement, so the average pay of
Sir, can you give me a
$33,000 a year. It's $6,000 above the poverty scale for Bay County.
That's, if you do 4 people times 30,000, what are you coming up with? 917,838,000.
The city has to pay 20% towards Florida retirement on behalf of that employee, as well as health insurance benefits.
I understand what you couldn't tell me, but he said over half the salary was vacant. How many men have we had to come up with $400,000 for salaries and for fire department? I mean, I ain't trying to throw a wrench in this, but that's too much money. Way too much money to be spent on the fire department. And where I come from, which is Georgia, we got a town beside, it's nowhere near that. So somewhere, the figures is all, I wish I'd been here.
So it's an increase of $435,000, and that just has to do with state retirement, the benefits we pay the employees and everything else. That salary the employee would make is only $33,000. The rest goes into, you know, it cost us over twice that to have one employee based on benefits and insurance and all that. So it's not all going to the employee, but to hire a guy at $33,000 costs the city almost $70,000, and that's just what it costs. I can't change that. That's based on our insurance, our retirement, and things out of my control.
And that's so that you have 3 at the station at all times, and you run a 24 shift, 3 24-hour shifts. So so you need to hire for 3 shifts. So it's not just for 3 additional firefighters.
That's 24/7 service.
Yes.
Is that 9 additional?
No, it's 6 additional. Right now, we fill 2 full-time positions with part-timers. Myself works a full-time shift position on top of being the chief, and the 6 more would just put 2 more on duty a day. So right now, you only have 1 guy. If there's a fire right now, I'm the only guy to respond. That's all there is.
Sandy, on non-residential, help me. I keep looking at this and I'll get it, I'll figure it out eventually. But on non-residential, you've got 50 cents a foot. What is that 42? Number of incidents, 42.
There were 42 incidents run to non-residential type parcels.
and you're saying that you have billing units of 272,553,
Square feet of non-residential square feet,
not of square feet.
non-capped square feet. Because those buildings that are over that 8,150 square feet, they don't count, those units
Okay,
don't
so,
count.
so when we mail all this out, those that are here or those that may watch this meeting, if you have a house, regardless of size, on a
Correct.
parcel of property in Mexico Beach, it's $356.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So that's what that is.
It's a flat fee per dwelling unit.
So the only people that are really gonna not know what they, I mean, that's, other than that they don't have that piece of paper in their hand, that's a fixed number.
Yeah.
The non-residential,
And if they know the size of, they know the structure size of their building, they can figure it out.
well, I did that.
Okay,
I took some of them. I just went around town and picked some of them out.
sure.
And I think that's gonna be a problem. A real problem. You take the Gulfview Motel. There's a $3,200 fire system at 50 cents a foot.
Where is it?
I just picked out 4 or 5, then I
How many
looked
square
at it.
feet? How many square feet?
6240,
6240.
6240.
But I have the list of all the non-residential, so I'm trying to find it actually on here.
Gulfview.
Well, that's just, but my point being, when you,
I don't know what the owner name is.
that's,
It's not the owner name.
that's 9 houses.
Okay.
Is it based on, I mean, and I'm going back to I just see that as an issue in our town when these non-commercial, non-residential property owners, is it based because of the lack of calls?
It's based on the amount of calls. It's not lack of calls.
I mean, excuse me, that's right, amount of
The
calls.
amount of calls is because they're using a lot of your resources for 2.82% of the parcels, they're demanding
16.2.
16.28% of your services. So they're demanding more services than their parcel makeup is.
It's just difficult for a house, regardless of its size or its value.
Yeah.
And then you take.
Well, I mean, because, and the value doesn't come into play,
understand.
in this methodology, because when somebody calls and says, my house is on
And
fire,
and
we
I
don't ask
understand
how
that.
valuable it is.
That's gonna be some tough numbers on some mom and pops.
It's tough numbers on homeowners too.
What address is it located at?
Well, it's tough, it's tough on everybody.
Yeah.
But when you look at it in comparison, it's pretty, if you look at the number, if you pull them up, but,
Your non-residential is high, yes, I'll admit that.
yeah.
But that's who's demanding the calls.
Well,
I mean,
I don't know
we
how
don't-
that came about, but I don't, I mean.
I
you
just
know,
looked at the calls,
I
where
know,
they're
but
going.
that's like at the El Governor, if they get a call on the beach, it's lodged at the El Governor.
No, we went through and pulled all those back out.
You said you did, but it's still, I'm just saying, that's gonna be a tough call. Yeah, Dave, go ahead.
Given particularly for the non-residential, the bulk of their income and I guess their cost structure as well is driven by tourism. Has there been any consideration given to funding any of this with some sort of local sales tax or something to pass some of the cost onto the tourists rather than the small business owners?
You can't do a sales tax. You can't do a local sales tax. I mean, they do, you do the, bed tax, but not a sales tax, not on sales.
Yeah,
retail sale.
Could you bump that a quarter of a percent or something? I don't know, just as a way to soften the
That's-
impact of them writing the check.
That's all state statute governed.
Yeah, no, this is based on those that own property.
I mean, you could do the funding of only 79% and continue to fund that first $200,000 from the general fund and then fund the enhanced services through the fire assessment.
Yes, ma'am.
Give me the total number of calls that you based this on in 2016.
There were 258 calls.
Okay, out of that 258 calls, are you saying that there's 258 calls on fires, or is this because fire rescue went to the call?
This is fire rescue, that's what we discussed on the slide. We can bill up to anything onto the first response level. To try to use fires in this city does not add up. Last year we had 5. The year before we had, I think, 1. And hopefully this year we'll have 0. So there's not enough calls to do it just off fire calls. And that would put the burden all on residential also.
Okay, then let me ask this. Every time there was a call, do you roll the big fire engine out and 4 guys in bunker gear?
If we had a new enough engine, we would be in the engine all the time. That is the standard. Unfortunately, our engine is a 2005, and we.
I don't care about the year of engine. If you get a call and there's no fire, yet you roll fire equipment and firefighters out there, what is the purpose of sending a fire crew instead of EMS to an EMS call?
We don't have an EMS service, so you would just have to wait on Gulf County if that was the case. And whenever they get here, that's when you get your first response. And the firemen would just have to stay in the house. And they wouldn't go to the call at all. If you don't bill them to go to the call, then they don't go. So they just sit in the firehouse.
But it simply makes no sense to me to send a fire engine and firefighters to a call that has nothing to do with fire, yet we're paying for them to do that.
It's a first responder level of service, and they're the first on scene and to issue first response. So if somebody's having a heart attack, they're there to give them CPR or whatever's needed until the level of EMS services that rises to the level of ALS services gets there. But they are the first on scene, they're the first responders there to triage at the level that they're authorized to
Which is
triage.
basically nothing.
That's not true.
No.
I'm an EMT. Half my guys are paramedics. I have 2 nurses that work for me. They're all highly trained. They provide excellent patient care. I would put them against many fire departments, so I'll have to argue that. I have some super highly trained guys. I got 4 flight paramedics that work for me.
I will take that statement back, and you are correct that we have always had, for the most part, highly trained people here. My point is, I don't understand. I'm not gonna get anywhere with this, I can tell. We need to find a way to separate out fire service and medical service, which has been the problem. Because we used to have emergency medical service, and we didn't roll fire trucks with it. We no longer have that. And so now we're paying for fire coverage where there's no fire.
I mean, you're rolling your response, which is the first responder level of service.
And that's the fire truck.
Calls.
Instead of in the past, when we had a EMS,
Exactly.
we didn't roll a fire truck. I mean, that's a
But if
valid
you provide
question. That's a
EMS
valid point.
services
Your
to the
SUV is a
customer-
fire truck. It's considered a fire truck. The SUV is a fire truck. The white truck's a fire truck. The red truck's a fire truck.
But
They're all
her point
fire
is
trucks.
well made. If you're labeling that as a fire call when there's absolutely no fire.
Okay, so here's the problem. When I came
So it
in,
doesn't have to be flagged.
we can run 2 different divisions again, but all firefighters are first response. That's all you guys have run historically over the history of the city. You guys have never ran more than first response. So if we want to get 2 different divisions, we can separate it again. but we're gonna double everything. Every firefighter in the state of Florida is a certified first responder. So when I came in, part of my thing was to look at this and say we don't need to run 2 different divisions. If we choose to split it up and run 2 different divisions, now we have to run 2 complete different budgets. So your fire ISO rating is gonna change regardless. I came in, I can't fix what happened before. It's gonna change if we don't put personnel on the truck. That's a fact. The firemen now are still running first response. You haven't lost any services, but now they're certified as a fireman. I have a full set of bunker gear, an SCBA, and a set of tools in the truck with me right now. So if someone's on a fire across the street, I'm gonna go in and get them out. If you're in a EMS truck, they're gonna sit there and watch them burn. So we're still running a fire response, just not a hose.
Let me clarify my point of if it's a clear medical emergency, does the fire truck go?
A fire truck goes.
A fire truck goes. When it's a clear medical emergency.
Like Adrian said, we have different levels of fire truck, but that SUV
Okay.
out there is a fire
The
truck.
SUV, I'm thinking of that you roll the doors up, the big engine.
The engine doesn't roll, but a fire truck rolls, sorry.
The
And
red,
this is not
the red
just
truck.
engine roll vehicles, this is your department responding to these
Respond,
calls.
okay.
In whichever
But I
vehicle.
want to clarify
was
that that's
that
some
they
of the
responded.
I think some people are
Yeah,
sitting
right.
there saying, you know, the whistle goes off and everybody jumps on the truck so that doesn't happen.
No.
It's the SUV
appropriate
truck,
apparatus responds.
which is a first responder.
It just depends on the call. If I get a car wreck and I'm in the station, I'm taking the fire engine because it has jaws of life. If I get a gas leak, I'm taking the fire engine. But the cost is not from running that fire engine to call. It's from having personnel on duty, regardless of what we're driving to the call. If that truck doesn't start, I'm taking the fire truck. So that's not the issue. But I know everyone says, well, EMS was separate. But historically, EMS here was run way different, and you had no one on duty for the fire department. So we've tried to combine them almost like every other fire department has done in the country. So I know there was 2 different divisions here, but part of what we're trying to do is bring it into one to lower the cost, and you get the same service. You actually get enhanced services.
If you had an EMS and a fire department, the cost necessarily, I mean, even though your calls might have gone down, what is the cost? I don't know the cost of an EMS, but I would imagine,
You'd be staffing 2 different departments
yeah, that it.
instead of.
To
I mean,
run
you
an
wouldn't be
ambulance, you're
saving
looking at
money.
a medical director. I don't even know if Bay County would give us authorization to get a certificate of public need. I mean, there's so many things that have to go into there to run an EMS department. You have to hire a doctor. I'm the wrong guy for that if we're going to run an ambulance, I'll be honest with you. But I doubt that's even a
Well,
possibility.
my point being, we wouldn't be saving money by having,
No, you double it.
you would possibly be.
Are we still operating under Gulf County's memorandum of understanding?
Yeah, that's a state statute. When you're in Florida and you operate as a first response agency, the law says you have to make an attempt to be under the medical direction of the responding agency, which the responding agency here is Gulf County EMS. Bay County pays them to respond. We don't. So we fall under their MOU, which means we fall under Dr. Pablo's medical direction.
Is he retiring anytime soon?
Dr. Pablo is probably not, their director maybe, but not their their director of their services, but not their physician. But they can't operate without a physician. They'll have to hire one immediately.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are you having a lot of citizen resistance to this?
No, I don't think many citizens know about it.
Okay.
I mean, we've had one meeting that when those that were here, they heard the same thing we heard for the first time. This is our second meeting, and I think Sandy's right. Until they get a notice that says, here's what you're gonna pay, I don't think people, it's just the way it is. They've been talking about this fire service, but I don't know what that means. There's something going on there at the city. But until they actually get their notice, I don't think they'll respond.
Typical human nature.
And I agree. I've talked to several citizens, tried to explain to them costs that would, as we're talking now, which isn't, fixed and granted or anything, try to give them an idea and I encouraged them, I've encouraged them to come to the meetings. They're not here.
It seems like a lot of fuss for 5 house fires last year. But,
But we have to have a fire department.
well, the thing is, I was looking into changing insurance on my house, and the people that I talked to for off and on the last 2 weeks, there was 3 or 4 different companies they represented, and they couldn't beat the insurance that I already had. But I asked them about this, and they said, don't ever, if you have anything to do with the ISO, don't let it go to a 10. I said, how much more would that cost? And they said, it all depends on the insurance company. And he said, several insurance companies will not insure you if you have a 10. And it's all because, we don't use the fire department that much, but we either want to keep our fire insurance level according to ISO at a 5 or better, 6 or better, and again, when you start looking at all these budgets and all that, it's a lot of money involved for a town our size. But it all comes down to rules and regulations. And so we're nearly damned if we do and damned if we don't.
I don't see how we could proceed. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. We have to have a fire department.
Well, I think my part is very reasonable. Al's sitting here with several buildings, and it's going to hit him pretty hard, and it'll hit the people we're talking about at the motels. But I'm interested in us getting by and doing what we need to do to keep our rating up as cheaply as we possibly can. Now, the other alternative is just raise taxes. Raise taxes. Yeah, nobody heard that. Raise taxes.
I really didn't hear
No,
that.
I'm sorry I said it too,
Well,
because nobody wants to raise taxes.
We ran that number, it would be just under 2 mils to come up with the money we needed. That's how much you'd have to raise your millage
We'd have
rate.
to raise taxes 2 mils.
Just under.
we've raised taxes every year, well, the last 2 years in a row.
Not by 2 mils.
But it has gone up.
And actually, your
That would cost,
suggested or your potential cost, you brought it down. I think it was closer to 500 when we talked about it at the beginning, and now you brought it down to
It was, this is
356. So-
all personnel costs.
Right.
I cut down all the equipment. I've been putting in grants steadily. We just got awarded a $3,000 toolkit. This is to fix the current station we have, not buy a new station, not buy any new stuff, buy one mid-sized truck that's as cheap as possible to get us by, because we do need a second engine. That was one of the things they mentioned to keep our rating. And I have cut this down to the minimum, and hopefully I didn't cut it too far down, but the plan is to keep working on the free equipment. There's some free equipment out there. There's not free personnel out there. So that's what I've been working on every day, day in and day out, on these grants like we've talked about. So I've cut this budget down to what I thought could get it by, and we're not paying these guys a ton of money. Someone asked earlier, it does cost us a lot of money to employ these guys, but you got to give them high-risk state retirement. That's state statute, unless you go to a private retirement. That's going to cost what it's going to cost. It's costing you that for the other employees too. And then the first year there was some money for bunker gear, but we got to put them in fire gear.
Let's look at the schedule, which is on page 11 or 12, depending on which number you look at. But it says that there's, tomorrow night would be the adoption for the resolution of intent. And that is nothing more than simply a resolution saying we're going to move forward with.
You need to open up the public hearing, because
Right.
it's a public hearing, but it's a procedural. If you decide not to move forward with it, it's just to keep your options available to use the tax credit.
Is that in our packet? Is that in our packet for tomorrow night? That resolution is in there in the wording? All right, that's for tomorrow night. Then January 9th, which is our next, I guess that's our first January meeting.
If you want to do that, or if you want to run with the other schedules, adopting your initial assessment resolution, if you're not
sure how you want to proceed with the rates, you would need to go with the next schedule, January 23rd.
Well, how do you decide if you want to go with the rates? I mean, the rates
You
are
guys
what?
make the policy decision. It's your policy decision on,
Oh, you're talking about the not, the government thing and?
well, and whether you want to go with the 79%
Okay.
rates or whether you want to go with the 100% rates. Now, another thing, that whatever rates, it's kind of like when you set your millage. You set it higher as opposed to lower because of once you have to send the notices out, and this would be the maximum unless you get additional notice. So you wouldn't say, let's start with 79 and maybe go to 100. You would say, let's start with 100 and maybe
Okay.
reduce
Drop
it
it
down
So
to
we
79.
can drop it
You
after
can drop
Can
that?
increase.
It's your
Okay.
final decision. After you maybe get some input and you say, you know, we've heard what you've said, we may go down to
Well,
the,
what happens if we adopt 79? Where do you get the money from?
The general fund, the 79% is still funding what we get now out of the general fund. The other option is you take that out of the general fund and we're funded independently.
and then you possibly could reduce your millage a little bit if you didn't want to use that other $200,000 for something else, if you didn't have a need
Say,
for it.
say that again?
Right now, you're funding $200,000 through the general fund.
General fund.
Uh-huh. So what the 79% says is that we're gonna continue to fund $200,000 from the general fund,
Okay.
and then we're gonna fund the rest of the
So
enhanced
that, the other
services.
200 on this paper comes from ad valorem tax.
Right.
Okay.
If we,
So if we went to 100% assessment, the 200,000 would come back to the city, basically, it's change.
For the general fund. to
Right,
do
for the
what
general
we need to
fund,
do with it.
right.
if we adopted, say, the full rate on the 9th, the initial adoption, and somewhere in between there and the final adoption, which it would be March the 13th, for instance, we said to heck with it, we'll accept the 10, which I don't think is smart, but if we said that, by adopting that initial one, that does not lock us in that we have to adopt something in the final,
No,
does
it
it?
just gives direction to mail out. The resolution will direct staff to mail notices, to publish notice, to set the public hearing for the specific date. It kind of just sets all the procedures and says this is the maximum, and then it comes back. Now, another thing too, you could initially opt not to exempt anybody, and then come back later after you hear the churches come back and complain, and other governments saying, I'm not gonna pay it, I don't care, and then you can exempt them after that too. It's
Well, there are no
always the
other
maximum.
governments.
Okay, so
So, I
it
mean,
would be
that's-
all your problem.
We are it.
We are exempt.
Yeah, okay. You're either gonna pay it from the general fund, or you're gonna
That's
pay it
right.
from the general
That's
fund.
Right, right.
So what I'm saying is not only do you decide on the rates, the maximum rates that you wanna consider, but you decide on the exemptions, or non-exemptions that you wanna consider.
From my point, I may be wrong, someone please correct me, but it almost seems beneficial to do the initial adoption on the 9th at probably the higher rate, because we don't want to go the lower rate, since that still gives us amount of time to say no, if we wanted to say no, we're not locked in, but that it would also get the letters out to our citizens earlier than the 23rd, a couple of weeks earlier, for them to think about it, talk to us, yell at us, whichever it comes back to, because we're still not locked in. To me, it seems like that January 9th date gets the information out sooner.
Yeah,
I agree.
I like the first column of dates too, and if we want to do an informal workshop, which I'm thinking Mexico Beach people would like that.
Right.
We could do it a week after January 23rd or 2 weeks, and that would be, what, February 7th? And
See,
then
I'm
we would
thinking
have
2
the
weeks
final.
Because that would give them time
time
to
to get
process
the
their
mail.
mail.
Sure.
You know, some people
Yeah.
will get the mail in the middle of the
Right.
week and throw it in a pile and not go through it the weekend or something, and then it might be rushed a little bit, so that's kind of what we see.
Okay?
I agree too.
Go ahead, Doc.
For Chief Simmons,
Yes, sir.
do you get any guidance on what's the expected level of service, just as it being a fire department? You know, you come in with your management, and you say, hey, I want to run this fire department. When we get a call, this is what I need to do to go to somebody's rescue. Like, when they call 911, they say police, fire, medical. If somebody says medical, well, medical's in St. Joe. I mean, my experience has been, the police is gonna show up first if they're close, and then the fire department's quicker thereafter, and they're there to help you.
Yeah, same thing. Like I have policy direction. I have that now. Unfortunately, I'm the only full-timer, so my other guys are part-time, and you know, we're not paying them a lot of money to work here. It's minimum wage, but without benefits. But yeah, there's direction on what to respond and how to go. We're usually there pretty quick. This is a small city. It's about 1.8 square miles, so we get there pretty quick. Our station's about the middle, but we're always going, and they know what to respond if that's what you're asking. Like if it's a house fire, they know to come with an engine. If you're having chest pains, they know to come in with the AED and the oxygen bag, and they know what to come in and do. They're trained regularly.
That's the volunteer guys.
Yeah, but I'm training them now. I've brought in 12 new volunteers since I've been here, and then retrained the 2 existing we had. And that's part of what I have to do is train these guys to know how to respond. And that's my job as an instructor and as a chief, is to keep these guys ready to go. They're already certified. If they weren't, that would also be my job, is to go send them and get certified.
So with the special assessment, the level of service, we assume, goes up.
Definitely, it would definitely go up.
And we talk a lot about, fire. It's not necessarily fire. We only had, 7 or 8, 9 fires.
5 last year, yes, sir.
If I've got a medical condition, I want you there.
You want whoever's
I want
closest
whoever's
available,
there,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you'd have. You'd have a crew of 3 responding. They'd come in and they'd assess you just like an ambulance crew. Most of the guys I have that work here, including myself, work EMS on their other jobs. So these guys are not just firemen. They're EMTs on their days off. They're nurses. They're flight paramedics, just like any other fireman. Like I work EMS on my days off.
We got like a network of cell phones, pagers, people monitoring radios that are in cooperation with you. So when the call comes into you, you send out a broadcast.
Yeah, well, no, it doesn't go. It goes directly to the guys on duty. It doesn't have to go through me. Now, I do get the calls via text message on my phone, so when I'm not here, I know what's going on and I can listen as being a chief. But whoever's on duty immediately gets the tones and goes out. There's a real loud plectron in the station if you're sleeping. I promise you can't sleep through that thing. It scares you every time. And so they're immediately, as soon as you call 911, they're toning out the fire department as they're calling the ambulance all at the same time. So that's why they say we're first response. As soon as the address hits, we're coming.
And then they stay there and stay with you until the ambulance or the higher level of EMS gets there.
And we only have one type. What's the largest type engine you have now?
We just have a standard Class A pumper. It's a 1250 pump, 1,000 GPM tank, which is pretty standard for this.
And that doesn't go out on every call?
No.
And you're qualified to teach all these things that need to be taught.
Yeah, we're actually doing a Fire One course now for a couple volunteers to get them certified. It takes about a year, so it's not a fast process. But when people are doing it for free, you can't force them. So, and I'm actually teaching that on my own time. To pay an instructor would cost you about $20,000 a year. I'm doing it as part of being the chief. That's part of why Mel hired me. I'm a certified fire instructor 1, and I can teach.
Which we haven't had before, I don't think.
Not in the history I can see.
Right.
Not in the last 10.
Yeah.
It sounds like from the insurance standpoint, that we really don't have much options. If our insurance is gonna triple or double or whatever it's gonna do, or be canceled. So we don't have a lot of options to look at. I guess my question is, what's the advantage of going to a millage compared to an assessment? From my standpoint, a millage is easier to swallow than an assessment is. And that's just my question. Is there one advantage over another? Obviously, you're going to get the same amount of money. It's not the money issue.
Well, the assessment becomes based on value. This has nothing to do with value.
We don't have enough time to fix this, to do a millage rate. We're going to go to a 10 before we can fix this. It's part of the reason I addressed this, and this was the option I presented. I came here after Things were already set. I'm trying to fix it on the back end. I'm working really hard, I promise you. The other thing, sometimes citizens actually like the fire assessment better, and that's because the funds are dedicated to the fire department. Once you do that, they're 100% dedicated to the fire department. They're not going anywhere else. You can't steal them and give them to the police, or you can't move them around. So typically, citizens support the fire assessment, opposite of what you're thinking, but there's not enough time to wait here. We'll go to a 10 if we choose to do that.
Well, that was the question, but what's the advantage of one to the other?
Well, we could go to taxes later.
Yeah, you could, yeah, because you have to elect it every year to do this. So.
Of course, well, what he's talking about then, we could get a raise up here on the board with some of that money. And the assessment is saying we can't get a raise from that money. But I understand your point.
But also assessment, I think, would probably, our businesses would have to pay more if we assess more, especially our large businesses.
Well, it may be
because of
better
the
down the
gap.
road to raise taxes, but you're going to be the one to suggest that.
No. I've already heard you say
There won't be a cap on those businesses anymore when you do it on a millage rate. Remember that too. So what's the value of those businesses that are capped too? They may pay more.
I think Jerry answered my question, but you can do an assessment this year and then roll it over and have it do taxes.
Every year you,
But to get the money we need now, you can do an assessment for
Right.
this year.
that's correct. That's correct. Anybody else? All right, for the table. So we meet tomorrow night for the thing. We don't meet again in terms of explanation from Sandy. We're down to the, just so everybody leaves here with the same understanding, we're down to the January the 9th for an adoption of the assessment, with a resolution for the adoption of the assessment.
She won't be here for that.
No, that's what I'm saying.
I would be here tomorrow, but I would be here.
Oh, you would, okay, never mind, she would be here on the 9th. I'm sorry.
Okay, just for clarification, anybody that's got any more questions, we'll have more time for more answers.
Is the 9th the adoption?
The 9th is
Initial.
the adoption for the
As
assessment.
we said, we were gonna do 100.
That would be your
Okay,
preliminary
that's the best,
maximum.
okay.
It's the
Yeah, that's when it's
preliminary
sort of like setting the
maximum.
millage rate.
Gotcha,
You can
gotcha,
always
gotcha.
come down, but you
Gotcha.
can't go up.
For clarification, can we said we were going to do an informational workshop on the 6th of February? Is that the timeline you were going with?
I missed that.
Do you want to do it on a Monday night or a Tuesday night?
When is planning and
It's gotta be a
zoning?
Monday night now that planning
Planning
is going back
So
to
it'd have to be the
Tuesday.
So
5th.
that will be the 5th, the week before your public hearing?
You have to allow them 2 weeks after the letter comes.
Right, it would be 2 weeks after the letter goes out, and we could put a little insert
So what's the date?
February 5th.
5th.
And I'm assuming it's you want to do it at 6 o'clock?
And you're, that's for the informational workshop.
For the, yeah.
And they, how long will that be after the letters?
It'd be 2 weeks after the letter goes out,
After
and a
planning
week
time.
before your final.
So that's February
5th.
5th?
Five,
Right.
yeah,
And,
Monday.
we
Monday.
can also too, we'll work with, your staff on, we could put an informational insert, frequently asked questions, why is this necessary, some of the, questions that people typically will ask.
Sure.
We can put that additional
Sure.
insert and have in there, hey, if you wanna find out more, we're gonna have this, February
idea.
5th. We can put that in there too.
Can we get it on our webpage?
We can give you as much information as you want. whatever
So
you
does
want.
that eliminate January 18th?
No, here's why, because you only have a weekly, a newspaper, and it has to be advertised in the newspaper at least
Okay.
20 days before the public hearing. And since your newspaper is, I think, on a Thursday, the 18th would be when it would go in the newspaper. And then the first class notices get mailed out on the.
Well, that's for
23rd.
advertising, that's not a meeting.
Yeah, that's advertising.
I'm sorry, I misread that.
I don't know.
Yes, it'll be in the Star.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Is there a Panama City paper?
Motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you everyone for coming. Sandy, I want to